Okay, so Reed, it's been a while, my friend. Lots going on, so much to talk about. I just want to start off by saying, since I really haven't seen or spoken to you in a while, what are you up to these days?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Michael, thanks for having me back. So listen, I am going to spend the next 80 or so days down in the trenches with the good people at the grassroots level. We at the Lincoln Project started a grassroots group called The Union. That's the Union, jointheunion.us, back in about March of 2022. And just this last month, we spun that out. So we're now an independent organization. And you can go and sign up there. We have 1,700 volunteer opportunities at any given moment. We update those daily. We're obviously spending a lot of our time in the what we call existential states: Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and making sure that our message about pro-democracy and why Donald Trump can't be president again is getting out not only to Democrats, but also to independents and soft Republicans. And so we are spending all our time on that. We've got about 50,000 volunteers total, 100 partner organizations. And so if there is a way that you need to get involved, if you want to get involved, but maybe you're not a Democrat, you're not an independent, you're not part of, a local group on the environment or whatever it is, come join us at the Union. Michael, think of us as like a political Airbnb. You don't have to live with us forever, but for the next 80 or so days, come and help out. We'd love to have you.
It's very, very smart. I love it. All right. So look, I want to jump into a whole thing. I just saw that Trump he's making his new decision is to bring back Corey Lewandowski, despite his history of controversial tactics and legal troubles himself. I mean, that should all raise very serious concerns if, of course, you're talking about a normal campaign. How do you interpret this move in terms of Trump's campaign's ethical and strategic direction? Because in essence, what does it say about his willingness to double down on problematic strategies and problematic people?
There's never been an ethical part of him, as you know better than anybody probably, and certainly his political campaigns haven't. They're amoral, not immoral. And I think this is, somebody like Lewandowski coming back, Michael, or Kellyanne Conway returning to the fore was, from my perspective, really a matter of when, not if. There was always going to be a time when the Trump campaign had trouble. Did they expect it would be anything like this? No, certainly not. But as you know better than anyone, Trump doesn't really trust anybody. He put his trust into competent professionals and people like Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, and they did what they could do as long as they could do it, which is they deluded themselves into thinking that, oh, wait, we can manage the monster. We can keep him in the cage. We can make this normal. The problem is that they did the one thing that I spend probably more time than I want to thinking about, which is what are the externalities? What are the things we can't control? The problem was that they never could control him any more than they could control the world as it was. And I've said this, like, I think that, I don't give Trump credit, but I'd be pissed off if I were him too, Michael. The idea that it looked like Joe Biden was teetering and that he might leave the race, and they did nothing as a campaign to prepare for the eventuality, A, that he'd leave, but B, that the most likely outcome was going to be that Kamala Harris was going to rise in his place. They've done nothing. And now they've lost a month, and they're going to lose another week or another couple of weeks as Harris is now getting ready for her coronation, and will probably get a week's worth of good air after that. And so now, I've heard now that from within the campaign, they're trying to recalibrate for some sort of post-Labor Day, relaunch or fusillade against Harris. And so do I think that Lewandowski's the answer? No. But for people who were supposed to know what they were doing, like LaCivita and Wiles, they really missed a massive step, and Trump's behavior was always going to be bad. I always thought he was going to be worse between now and Election Day, or between his convention and Election Day. But now he sees the ground crumbling out from beneath him, and whether or not it's political, financial, legal, whatever it is, he's grasping at straws to find people who will tell him, yes, Mr. President, you are right. You should never have listened to those people in the first place.
Well, then he's right to have Lewandowski. But, when you were saying about Kellyanne Conway, I have to be honest with you. I am the one who brought her into the fold with the Trump campaign. I don't agree with her messaging. Nevertheless, I do have to acknowledge that she is not like Corey Lewandowski. She's not like Chris LaCivita. She's not like Stephen Chung at all. She's actually really professional. I don't agree with her positions, but she's not despicable like Lewandowski is. And I, along with Don Jr., had the privilege of shit canning Lewandowski when he was involved with the campaign. And the reason that I shit canned him with Don Jr. is because he was actually reaching out to media contacts. And he was the reason that they were running certain negative stories. The funny thing is that the negative stories were about Ivanka and Jared. I mean, and what he would do is he would plant them with people, and he would promise them that he would do other, things, and he would get Donald to do an interview with them, a one-off or a scoop. And that's how Corey Lewandowski behaved, not like a professional, but more like a self-centered, egotistical guy, opportunist. Is really what it was. And when that was brought to Trump's attention, after I discovered it, I brought it to Ivanka and Jared, and they asked me to go speak to the father. I did. He called the kids in. It was like, yeah, Michael, you always hated Lewandowski. Well, I do. I despise him for a set of reasons. One, he's a liar. And basically everything about his life was a lie. And two, as I said, an opportunist calling and spreading rumors about Jared's sexuality, about the relationship going on between Jared and Ivanka, marital problems. I mean, all these things. These are the kind of shit that Lewandowski was creating, not to mention the whole thing with Hope Hicks, where I had to kill that story. He was having an affair with her during the campaign. I mean, listen, for an ugly looking fuck, he ended up certainly getting a few women that are far above, I'm sure, where he belongs. But it brings me to the next question that I really want to ask you, which is, given all of Lewandowski's previous management style problems and the controversies that surrounded him, I mean, he's got his own legal issues too. How do you think that his return to this campaign will exacerbate, or, I'm going to throw it in there, though I don't believe it, mitigate the existing chaos that exists within the Trump campaign? I mean, do you think that this is a sign of desperation or a continuation of failed tactics?
Yes. I think both of those things. And I think both of those things can exist simultaneously. I mean, I think in life we forget, Michael, that most people return to the mean, right? They might step out of, 2 or 3, lanes to the left or to the right in whatever it is they do. But ultimately they come back to who and what they are. This is what Trump is. This is what his campaigns have always been. His campaigns have always been shit shows. They've always been a disaster because they start and end with him. He's the alpha and the omega of the operation, as you know, as I said, is better than anybody. And so this will exacerbate the chaos because now you're going to have, Lewandowski calling the old man saying, I tried to tell him to do this and they won't do it. And then Trump losing his mind. And so now the whole thing is going to be turned inward as opposed to outward. And I really do believe, although you've had to deal with this much more directly than I ever have, that I like to say that the only people that MAGA hates more than you or me are each other. I mean, it's always been a nest of vipers. It's always been, and he's enjoyed that, right? He's always encouraged that because, just like many other people, if you're uncomfortable with your own place in the world or with your subordinates, make sure they fight with each other. And that makes sure you maintain your predominance in the place. And so, I mean, Lewandowski, look, this was not a guy who was like some great political strategist or theorist or campaigner, right? He was like an Americans for Prosperity goon in New Hampshire who happened to drive Trump around.
Shit canned. No, he got shit canned from that as well. I think it had something to do with There was some funds that were missing, or all I know is he got shit canned from that first position.
Right. So, I mean, it's Lewandowski. What's his name? The social media guy who was the
Dan Scavino.
The caddy. Scavino, Johnny McEntee, who was the body guy. Now he's the personnel guy. Like, this is par for the course, so to speak, for Donald Trump, which is elevating people who have no business whatsoever into positions far outside.
Do you know the reason? Reed, do you know the reason why we ended up bringing Lewandowski on as a campaign manager?
I don't.
This is true. Because he was cheap. Really, really right. Cheap. And when I tell you cheap, I'm talking about really, really cheap. I remember we went to this one campaign manager, and they never thought Trump was going to be able to go far, so they wanted a lot of money a month. They wanted like $250,000 a month to be the campaign manager. There was like what was it? It was about 11 or 12 months left. And Trump was like, I'm not paying that. Lewandowski, I think we got for like $5,000 a month plus housing, right? And I mean, that's what it was. It was all about being cheap, because Donald didn't think he was going to win it. He didn't think he was going to get, to the later stages. So we got a guy with zero experience. But I will tell you one thing. At least Lewandowski was smart enough to understand, let Trump be Trump. That was a line that you would hear from Lewandowski on a daily basis when people would try to guide him. You can't guide Donald Trump. He's like, he's like a, just a wanderer, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. And if you want to try to bring him down the center, you're the one that's going to end up getting pushed to the left or to the right. So Lewandowski realized this very early on because he needed the $5,000. And he was like, just let Trump be Trump.
Well, also, there's that old expression, be for what is, right? Trump has been this. He's always going to be this. The fact that he started with a pedestal from the money his dad gave him. And let's be clear, Michael, the guy was born with a horseshoe up his rear end, right? The fact that he went from being who and what he is to president of the United States, like only Donald Trump could have figured that out. And it was intuitive. It wasn't some plan, right? Like you said, in 2016, he didn't think he was going to win. He won because
we weren't expecting to win. This entire campaign, you've heard me say this a million times, was supposed to be, when we started it in 2011 and then again in 2015, it was always supposed to be nothing less than the greatest infomercial in the history of U.S. politics. It was all about rebuilding the brand and making the brand international.
Right. The problem is the people bought the product.
Go fucking figure, right?
Right. So, I laugh because I cry otherwise.
Yep. So meanwhile, look, there's another issue which is now front and center. Trump's Sloat attorney, and Sloat is an acronym for the stupidest lawyer of all time, and I'm talking about Todd Blanche, just sent a letter in to Judge Juan Merchan requesting a delay in sentencing in the Manhattan DA case, the 34 criminal felony convictions that on September 18th, Donald is due to appear at court to be sentenced. Accountability. And these involve obvious serious allegations of the hush money payments, the business record fraud, etc. All of this, including these letters and the motion that was just denied a few days ago, which mirrored two before it, so it was 3 denied motions, they all seem to be a tactic for Donald to avoid accountability, especially to avoid accountability come the debate time, when he will be going up against Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor who I am certain intends to shove this right up his ass. So how do you view this delay request in terms of Trump's attempts to evade legal consequences before the November election?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think that's probably right. Second is, I think it's also a tactic to remind, I'd say, Republicans and his base vote of the, martyr-like nature, right? That these people have been after him. They've been after him. Look, they're coming for me. They're going to put me in jail. I'm going to jail for you, right? I am your Messiah. And so I think there's a fair bit of theater in this as well. And so, I think that you've said this in many times when we've talked before on the show, is that like he's scared to death of going to prison. Okay, that's a legitimate fear, right? Yep. And so I think that he's making an assumption that if they can push it off until after the election, that he's going to win, right? And then it won't matter. Now, I would venture to say that you could make an argument, Michael, that even if he was sentenced on September 18th, that I assume they'd hold something in abeyance, given the fact that you have an election 6 weeks or 8 weeks hence. So, I think it's all just a matter of trying to bring this back up, because they're trying to do something to change the narrative so far, which is he's old, he's crazy, he's completely unhinged. And everything we've seen from, the Lewandowski news to the insanity that J.D. Vance repeats out loud over and over again, they need something to try and make him, both put him back in the spotlight, which he hasn't been really, and make him, and I'm going to use this word very, very loosely, sympathetic to the people that he needs to get back. Because right now, Michael, he's got a whole bunch of Republicans who are going to do one of two things. They're going to stay home in droves, or a bunch of them are going to stay home and a bunch of them are going to pull the lever for Harris because they just don't want him around anymore.
Right, and which is rightfully so. I mean, there are plenty of members of the GOP who do not take kindly to Donald Trump's flattery, adulation over the overturning of Roe versus Wade, patting himself on the back, talking about how he himself, after 50 years of stare decisis, has managed to stack a Supreme Court, to overturn women's reproductive decision-making, decision. Yeah.
No, look, I think if I've said this for months now, if I were my Democratic friends, I would be running that 8-second clip of him saying, "I killed Roe, I killed Roe, I killed Roe," on every college campus and in every suburban neighborhood in target states across the country, and just run that over and over and over again. Because you're right, and I think there's the piece about about abortion, right, about a medical procedure. But I think for a lot of soft Republicans, or Republicans I used to be, Michael, I think there's also an individual liberty piece, which is the Republican Party used to be against the idea of overarching government control, the government telling you what you could and couldn't do with yourself, with your kids, with your firearms, whatever it is. And this is a strike against that, right? They can claim it's states' rights all they want. When you have one state saying, if you travel outside our borders to get an abortion, you're liable for prosecution. Like, that's not small government.
No, it's not. And we'll talk about one additional thing that just came out in kind of like really all over the place. So that my unconstitutional remand case is now before the Supreme Court of the United States via a writ of certiorari. We are asking the Supreme Court of the United States to hear this case, to give me my day in court. And just the other day, Norm Eisen and John Michael Dougherty, my attorney from the Gilbert firm, they actually put a motion right before the writ of certiorari, and they put their brief in. Well, an amicus brief was just filed the other day, where it's like 15 of the top constitutional law professors and gurus in this area all signed on to this amicus, demanding that the Supreme Court hear it. And I bring this up because one of the issues that we all must be very, very concerned about, and we must be vigilant, especially when getting to the polls, to make sure that it is a Harris-Walz victory, but by a mass margin, a massive blue wave, is because everything that Donald Trump has told you that he intends to do, he has actually accomplished at least once prior, when he weaponized the DOJ and had me unconstitutionally remanded because, and these are not my words, these are the words of Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, Southern District of New York federal judge, like 30 years on the bench, when he said, I've never seen in all of my years on the bench, your sex life is important, but your schedule is just busy. And you don't have time to go to the doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through HIMSS, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. HIMSS is changing men's health care by providing access to affordable sexual health treatments, all from the comfort of your own couch. HIMSS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments, such as chewable hard mints, proven treatments like Viagra and Cialis, or their generics for up to, get a load of this, for up to 95% cheaper. The process is simple and 100% online. No uncomfortable doctor visits. So just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. And no insurance is needed. Pay one low price for your treatments, online visits, ongoing shipments, and provider messaging. I mean, HIMSS has hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers. So if ED is getting you down, it's time that you find the option that works for you. So go right now and start your free online visit today at HIMSS.com/Cohen. That's HIMS.com/Cohen for your personalized ED treatment options. That's HIMSS, HIMS.com/Cohen. And the products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. And remember, restrictions apply, so see website for details and important safety information. Subscription required, and prices vary based on product and subscription plan. Anything like this before, that the actions of the DOJ, Trump, Bill Barr, etc., were retaliatory because Cohen wanted to publish a book which is critical of the president and had his First Amendment constitutional rights violated when he refused to waive them. This is not a joke. When he says that he is going to use SEAL Team 6 to go after his critics or his political opponents, I don't know why people refuse to listen to all of the things that Donald Trump has said he intends to do, like to rewrite the Constitution, to strip the tripartite system of government, the legislative branch and the judiciary, of their co-equal power, confer all power to the chief executive, which is himself, and basically turning himself into a king. So if you do not want a king, and you are not sure where to go and what to do to help get out the vote to make sure that we have a massive blue wave, remind everybody one more time, Reed, the name of the organization that you're currently involved with.
Yeah, sure. So it's called The Union, and you can find out more about us at jointheunion.us. And let me say that again, is that you're absolutely right, Michael, which is we need to win in November, not by a little, but by a lot. Because all of those people who took a peek in post 2020 at the state level about maybe helping Donald Trump, and all of those thousands of people who went to Washington and some of them have been convicted federally, some are still federal inmates, right? They need to see that it's so overwhelming a margin that, you know what, they go, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to put myself on the dock for this guy. But let me say the other part too, though, is I think you make an incredibly important point. You are patient zero of Donald Trump's utilizing the federal government to retaliate against his opponents. And look, I participated in 4 different exercises with the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU about what an early Trump presidency looks like, the first 90, 120 days. And a lot of this stuff is already there. And let me just say, you probably already know this, Michael, is that if the executive branch wants to be expansive in its authority, there's not a lot that the legislative branch can do about it. And based on what we saw, and this was pre the immunity decision, there wasn't a lot the judiciary branch was gonna do about it, right? So I think that, let me just say this also, is that Trump is talking about how he's gonna win no matter what. Democrats are saying we need to win, we need to win, we need to win. But if we don't hear the things that we need to try and put in place ahead of that, Trump is not taking the idea that he could lose. That's not even in his thinking. Democrats, at least, and pro-democracy people are at least saying, we got a lot of work to do and we could still lose. And let's do everything to make sure that we can't. And so you and your listeners need to go to jointheunion.us, sign up. Again, guys, we have recruited just this month, and we're only halfway through. We've already recruited 500 new people. We need to recruit another 500 or 1,000 before the end of the month, right? Again, we're already at 50,000. Let's get to 60,000, 70,000 by election day. And if we do that, Michael, and we turn out every Democrat available, every independent available, and enough Republicans, Trump can't win. And not only can't he win, he'll lose in a landslide.
Yep, totally agree. Now, the truth is he should lose by a fucking landslide. I mean, it really shouldn't even be close. Right. I mean, the guy's got numerous legal issues. The 4 indictments, impeached twice. He had the sexual assaulting conviction. He owes $500 million to the state of New York on the civil fraud case. I mean, the guy's got legal issues all over the place, including what we were just talking about, the Manhattan District Attorney case. You think any of these will become a focal point as far as his campaign putting out a coherent message? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, how do you believe that all of these ongoing legal battles, which are undermining Trump's credibility, at least to those that are not morons, right? How will he be able to present a coherent campaign message that doesn't get drowned out by all of these legal issues and the potential sentencing that's coming up against him?
Well, I think they very well might be one and the same. I think it's there. You know, look at what they're doing this to me because they don't want you to have what you want, because this is the way they're going to steal the election from you. Right. This is what America really wants and really needs. But, you know, the deep state and listen, if you don't think that the race of Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis and so many other people is not going to come back to the fore. Right. And frankly, Kamala Harris, you got another thing coming. This is going to get incredibly ugly, uglier than maybe anything we've ever seen. And that's saying something in 2024, Michael. And so I think it's all going to be tied together in the victimhood, in the revenge, in the retribution. It's all gonna weave together, because let me say this: the only coherent strategy Trump has is self-preservation. That's it. You know, himself in the middle of it, and everything flows from there. There's no, I mean, yes, they'll run ads and they'll do polling and all that other stuff, but the truth is that Trump drives his own message. Trump is his own message. He is, as I said, he is the beginning and the end and the top and the bottom of his own campaign, and his campaign will ultimately fail because of him.
Yeah. Well, look, so what I take from what you're saying is that what Trump is going to try to do is to deflect attention from his legal troubles, right? And try to shift it somewhere else. And I think you pose a very plausible response by him, which is, it's not about me. I'm the only one standing between you and them, or worse, them and you. That works for a very small percentage of even the GOP. It is inarguable that these hush money payments were made. Now, people may say that it's a ticky-tack type of an offense. It shouldn't have even become criminal. And so, nevertheless, I ended up being forced to plead guilty, to the same exact campaign finance. But it's okay for me to go to prison, but not for him. I get that. But 12 independent jurors, after hearing 6 weeks worth of testimony by 22 different people, made a determination that he was guilty on all 34 counts. And I don't see how one successfully deflects the outcome of that case, or the fact that he stole documents, top secret documents, showed them to people who it shouldn't be, even though that case has not been tried as of yet, or maybe if it ever even is.
Right.
But people understand what he did. And when you start compounding these 4 different indictments, I think Trump's attempt to deflect is going to be a gigantic failure.
And, you know, I was thinking about this as you were talking, Michael, too, because remember that so much of Trump and his campaign was predicated on the idea that, one, all these charges were bogus, right? But 2, that Joe Biden was just as dirty as he was. That Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and China and Burisma and all this other stuff, right? That's all gone, right? They don't have that anymore to hold up. And so now Trump has to stand on his own as the person who has done all these things. And, you know, they could do what they want to try and do to Kamala Harris. But the truth is like, they've tried some of this stuff already. It hasn't worked. And so all of their entire campaign plan has just been thrown out the window. And so now I think that there's a lot of even, you know, independents who thought, yeah, okay, maybe this was a ticky-tack thing, or maybe I don't really understand the, you know, the documents thing. But here's the thing is like, do I want more of this? Do I really want more of this? I mean, this guy's been at this for a long time. I've always known he's been crooked, right? He's always sort of laughed with impunity. You know, he didn't pay people. He got away with this stuff. He's been sued 8 gajillion times. But the truth is, like, can I really do this for 4 more years? Is this really what I want? Do I know everything I want to know about Kamala Harris? Maybe not. But like, does she seem normal? Yeah, she seems normal. Does she seem competent? She seems competent. Does she seem calm? She seems calm. Trump is chaotic and crazy and criminal. Like, do I want more of that? Even if I might agree with him on policy, like we're so far away from policy, Michael, like that's not where anybody's going to vote on this. And so I think the other part too is that there's just a lot of otherwise normal American voters who might just be exhausted by the whole thing. Like, I just don't want to hear about it anymore.
Yeah, well, too bad. And if I was advising the Harris campaign and trying to provide them some type of a strategy, I'll tell you exactly what I would do right now. I would start to highlight all of the Biden-Harris administration's achievements. And I would also bring forth the ongoing challenges that remain for America to face. You know, when people start telling you things like, well, yeah, but, you know, the price of gas is higher now than it was, 5 years ago. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because nobody was going to work and a million people were dying.
Correct. We also had COVID, right? And so supply increased, demand decreased. And so as a function of economics, you had a reduction in the price. I mean, it's just that simple. So my question to you, as being a guy who's been doing this for so many years, how do you think that Harris campaign should highlight all of the current administration's successes to counteract the negative impacts of Trump's campaign strategies and his attempts to distract from all of his legal issues?
Look, I think you're right about the policy stuff, right? And but I would use it as an example of a value, right? A value proposition, which is, I'm Kamala Harris and I am Tim Walz, and we are here because we are going to work for you. Our job is to work for you. We are servants of the American people. We are not rulers of the American people. And look at the things that we have tried to do to improve the educational, employment, financial, security, whatever it is, right? But the idea here is like we are trying to do our best for as many Americans as we can, right? We get up every day and we say, how can we make Americans' lives better? How can we make America the leader in the world it needs to be, right? How do we turn the page on all this stuff? Because Harris is as good a figurative and literal foil to Donald Trump as you could find, right? She's younger. She is more attractive as a candidate. She is, she's happy. She's bringing joy. And, I was doing another interview a few minutes ago, Michael, and this idea, somebody said like Tim Walz is sort of like the the Ted Lasso of the campaign. Clearly, there is a hunger amongst the American people for some positivity, right? So for some joy, for somebody who says, yes, we got troubles, but you know what? The good news is we're Americans, and there's nothing we've ever faced we couldn't figure out, right? Whereas Trump says we're Americans. We're as bad as everybody else. We're as crooked and weak and craven as everybody else. But that's really a reflection of Trump, not of America. And I think there's a lot of Americans, including, importantly, a lot of Republicans who don't like that. They do believe America is an exceptional place, that America is the greatest republic that humanity's ever known. And they don't like the idea that the perceived leader or the would-be leader doesn't like the country he wants to lead.
And remember, this is a guy who in Helsinki was sitting with Putin and decided that he was going to accept Putin's word over that of our law enforcement. You bring up such a great point, because the entire Harris campaign strategy has been, despite, every country, every person, every family has an issue. Every single day, you have an issue in your own personal life. We have issues in this country, whether it's inflation, whether it's the economy, whether it's going to be healthcare, whether it's immigration and migration and whatever. We have a slew of issues that are extremely big, and they take a long time to figure out, because there is no way to correct it overnight. Climate change, there just is no way to do it.
Right.
However, when Harris and Walz talk about it, they talk about it with American exceptionalism and positivity. Trump has basically called every politician an idiot. He's basically shit on America every time he can. We're a stupid country, we're failing around the world. We're failing around the world. A schmuck. And this is where I hope Kamala Harris during the debate turns around and says, a schmuck. Name another country that you would want to live in other than the United States of America, where you have the freedom to be the asshole that you are, right? The freedom that somebody with such a deficient moral character could actually rise to not just being the president of the United States, but actually trying to make a comeback and to do it for a second time. Name another country that is better than the United States on a gross domestic product basis. And let me just turn around and say, because Donald, you don't know shit from Shanola, all right? There is none. Our economy is 2.5 times the size of anybody else. And number 2, I think, is China. So when you talk about America in such a disparaging way, that too is inaccurate. And I think that at the upcoming DNC convention, this is one of the specific things, one of the rhetoric that they need to address, including all of Trump's legal and ethical concerns that surround him, his campaign, and so on. That's what I think that they need to do. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's right. I mean, what I would do is, obviously Vice President Harris will speak Thursday night. So that's going to be a big, forward-looking positive speech. And I'm sure there will be some references to Trump in there. But I think on Wednesday night, Tim Walz will give both an introduction of himself, but also he will be, like Cheney did in 2000 at the Philadelphia campaign, right? His rhetorical device was, the wheel has turned, it's time for them to go. He was speaking about Bill Clinton and Al Gore, right? That chapter of America needed to close. I think that Walz can and should do that. Look, I would say this. I would save the Republicans for Harris, whoever they are, the more prominent, the better, to make the case against Trump, right? That look, I'm just speaking, projecting here. I'm a conservative. I grew up a conservative. I spent my life in the Republican Party. Trump's no Republican. He's no conservative. The things he espouses and the things he says he believes in are fundamentally un-American. They lack any sort of grounding in what I consider conservative thought. Have the Republicans, who no Democrats showed up to make that case against then Joe Biden at the Republican convention. Have the Republicans that you have available to you make that case against him, and say, like,
if you're like me, you're constantly thinking about safety of the people and the things that are most important to you and that you value the most. I mean, after years ago, this happened to me and my family. We got robbed. We had a house upstate in New York. One day we showed up, right? It was a holiday and everything was gone. And I knew that we needed to secure the home with the best. And my research led me to Simply Safe. I've trusted Simply Safe to protect my home for years now, and the level of security and customer care has been absolutely incredible. So first of all, I sleep better every night knowing Simply Safe's 24/7 monitoring agents are standing by. They're standing by to protect me, and if someone tries to break in, and then I just send an emergency help when I would need it the most. So I want you to have the same peace of mind that I do and so many listeners experience every day, which is why I've partnered with Simply Safe to offer listeners, get a load of this, 20% off a system. And just simply visit simplysafe.com/mea culpa. And that's SIMPLISAFE.com/mea culpa. What I love most is that Simply Safe just keeps getting better. With exclusive LiveGuard protection, Simply Safe agents, they can act within 5 seconds. Get a load, 5 seconds of receiving your alarm, and they can even see and speak to intruders inside your home, warning them that the police are on their way. As a Simply Safe user, it's no surprise that Simply Safe has been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years running, and the best customer service in home security by Newsweek. Protect your home this summer with 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/mea culpa. That's simplysafe.com/mea culpa. And that's SIMPLISAFE.com/mea culpa. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
I've given my whole life to the Republican Party, and here I am telling you, as a Republican, to my Republican friends and my independent friends, you should have nothing more to do with this man. We as a country, as a nation, and as a party should have nothing more to do with this man, right? And have the Republicans look, and that's what we did with the Lincoln Project in 2019 and 2020. Nobody had ever seen it, right? A significant faction of Republicans forcefully, publicly, and repeatedly saying, this guy's bad for all of us. We should have nothing more to do with him. And I think we should do that next week.
And it's true. His influence is just catastrophic to the GOP. So it's interesting because, you are a former GOP. It's like when I have Joe Walsh on my program as well, a guy who was a member of Congress, right? A GOP. He's a Republican
and a real live MAGA guy, yeah.
And a real, yeah. So, I mean, it is inarguable that Trump's continued influence negatively impacts the GOP's reputation and their credibility. It's why people like yourself or Joe Walsh or Mitt Romney or so many others, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, they all are walking away, but not just from Trumpism, but from the GOP. So my question to you is, would you say that the party's alignment with Trump is eroding its appeal, its ability to appeal to moderate and independent voters? Because if so, I don't see how any member or any person who's running for a position can stick with the GOP, because you cannot win unless it's a local race. On a national basis, you cannot win without moderates and independent voters.
I think that's right. I think we forget that, even in 2016, Trump won by a hair's breadth. But since then, he's been electoral poison, if he's on the ballot or not. And MAGA is electoral poison. And what we have seen, remember 2022, Michael, was supposed to be the red wave, and it wasn't. Democrats held serve in a lot of places. And if the party, or if the governmental leaders in New York could get their act together on gerrymandering, the Democrats would have held the House. And so I think you're absolutely right. And what we have seen in U.S. House races and in legislative races, and even these local races, like the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, or the mayor of Colorado Springs, Colorado, per capita, probably the most conservative city in the country, right? Is that a competent, confident, decent Democrat will beat a MAGA nut. Now, that hadn't applied to Trump, but I think it's starting to apply to him because, again, he's dealing with a lifelong, personality disorder, but I think he's also dealing with significant cognitive impairment, right? And so all of that coming together now with a country that is still, even now, just 8 years later, fundamentally different from where it was when he ran in 2016. I mean, anything before COVID, from my perspective, Michael, is the before times. Right. I mean, sometimes you read books, right, and political books that were written before COVID. They seem almost quaint by comparison, right? Like it just seems like such a different time, or certainly before Trump came on the scene full time. And so, what I would say is this: is that he is bad for the party. He is bad for the brand. And the question is now, if and when he loses in November, again, if he loses badly and Democrats pick up a whole bunch of U.S. House seats and a whole bunch of legislative seats, and maybe they even hold the United States Senate, then you're going to have this massive, massive torque inside the Republican Party because, as you know, Trump's not going to want to go away, right?
Nope.
MAGA at the state and local level still has a lot of purchase on the party. And now you're going to have the likes of, whether or not it's a J.D. Vance or a Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley or all these other goons who are now going to try and figure out, okay, I was relatively speaking, well, Cruz was never normal. I was going to be a normal Republican. Then Trump came on the scene, so I had to do that. But where do I go now, right? Do I try and recreate myself in the image of, a quote unquote, Paul Ryan Republican? I don't think the party base allows for that really in the short term. Maybe in the next couple of cycles. And so what I would say is that we have an opportunity, and I would say a responsibility after 2024, right? On November 6th, it's like we go and say, okay, where is MAGA and where can we pick them off? Because until and unless we drive that virus out of the body politic, starting with the Republican Party, the remnants of it, right? The remnants of that sickness will continue to plague us. And I think that, our biggest, most important thing is to crush Trump and J.D. Vance in November. Very shortly thereafter, it's to say, look across the horizon and say, okay, where are we going to go next? Because until we have some semblance of a center-right party that believes that democracy matters, right? I'm not even talking about issues, but that democracy matters, then we will not have overcome this sickness that Trump was both an accelerant of, right, but also an expositor of, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. You know who I actually hold partially accountable for the rise of Trump, not just in 2011 for 2012 when we ended up bailing out, but then 2015 when he was successful in 2016, and the fact that in 2020 it was still a relatively close race, even though the Electoral College, was substantially in Biden's. It was really only over 85,000 votes.
Yeah, it's very narrow,
something like that. I hold the media. Yep. I hold media accountable because I'll give you an example. And again, I give this example because I was front row and center to it.
Yeah.
During for example, the New York Attorney General case, the civil fraud case, when Trump would come, from the time he left Mar-a-Lago with that whole caravan of assholes and like 8 different trucks, to the time he landed over at Teterboro in New Jersey, or at LaGuardia, to the time that he made it to the courthouse, they're shutting down streets. The air travel is now interrupted. They basically gave him a king's welcome, as if he was president of the United States. They treated him like he was a dignitary, as opposed to what he was going for, which is to be charged as a criminal, whether it's civilly or criminally, right? When he was there for the Manhattan DA case, every day they would shut down all the streets, and they have the sirens going, and you have motorcades, and you have his, group of people who were there. He brought on one person to come with a wireless printer so that she could have printed out for him all of the articles for him to look at. Yeah. He won't read a newspaper, but he'll read blips of a clip where they would highlight it for him.
Right.
And he comes out with a stack of papers, some of which were blank, right? Just to make it look like there's thousands of documents all saying that Donald Trump didn't do anything, that this should all be, dismissed immediately, and so on. I blame the media, because the media has realized that von Schitzenpants, which is what I refer to him as, and now Lady Vance, all right, these two are actually television gold. I mean, this guy is fucking gold to them, and they're selling advertisement during that area. They're getting the eyeballs that they seek and that they need. They're able then to, get bigger profits. I mean, Jeff Zucker, who used to run CNN, and the fact that CNN ever allowed this guy to leave makes no sense. I bumped into him in the street not too long ago, and I said, if CNN's parent company, if they had half a fucking brain, they would give you $1 billion to bring you back, because CNN is like a fucking joke now. They want to be like Fox Light. So I blame media coverage for it. Look how many times they have people on like Ty Cobb. Really?
Right.
Ty Cobb? They have people like Steve Miller or Jason Miller coming on their programs. They have, they have all of these folks that are Trumpers. When you're talking about an issue, for example, about being found guilty, criminally liable for 34 counts. Now you want to bring somebody in who's going to turn around and going to defend the guy and say that it's not a real case. Michael Cohen's not a credible witness and so on. Funny, because the only person that they found not to be credible was actually Donald Trump and his people, like Bob Costello. My question really to you is, what do we need to do? You with Union, Lincoln Project, MeidasTouch Network, the Michael Cohen Show on YouTube, here, Mea Culpa, or my Political Beatdown podcast as well with Ben Meiselas. What do we need to do in order to drown out the media narratives that are bolstering Trump as greater than the criminal figure that he truly is?
Well, this is a great question, and you're right. I mean, I think the biggest issue, you hit the nail on the head, was that American media generally, but in particular American political media, has just been clickbait with better names, right? The New York Times is clickbait. The CNN is clickbait. Like they know if they put Trump at the top, right, that they will get clicks. Or like the New York Times, if they said something bad about Joe Biden in a headline, angry Democrats would click on it. That's the basis of a lot of this stuff. What I would say is this: if you go back to was it 3 weeks ago now, when Trump was at the National Association of Black Journalists convention, right? I think her name is it Amy Scott from ABC.
It sure is. Rachel Scott.
Excuse me, Rachel Scott. She did what you're supposed to do.
She sure did.
As a journalist, Mr. Trump, account for this thing you said. Account for that thing you said.
It's a nasty question. You don't come in. You don't say hello. You don't say hi. Good afternoon, Mr. President. How are you? Quite frankly, I think it's a very nasty question.
Because, this all goes back to, I think there's one overarching thing, and I think it frankly comes down to fear, Michael, that the media has, which is if Trump wins and they haven't basically given him a pass, and I'm going to call it a pass, then they're afraid that they won't get access, that, in a second Trump administration, the White House briefing room will just be really where, news outlets receive their orders for the day, right? Their stories for the day. And so they want to be able to have that access. And here's the other part they know, which is if Trump loses, they'll be accepted back into polite political society and they'll go on as if the world was fine, right? And they'll do the things they feel like they need to do. But it's all predicated on the idea that like they don't want to be shut out if Trump wins. And that's not your job. Your job is not to be worried about whether or not you're shut out. Your job is to worry about, like, I'm not even asking for objectivity, right? I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for the idea that it's like Donald Trump says that Kamala Harris's crowds are AI generated because he's obsessed with crowds, right? And that's like a 15-minute deal. But then there's a news outlet that does a fact check on the fact that Tim Walz says that he was the first, he's the first union member since Ronald Reagan to run for national office. Oh, but Donald Trump was a member of SAG-AFTRA. Like, that's what you spent your time on, right? Like, that's fact check. Tim Walz is wrong about union membership. Like, okay, like that's where you're going to go? Or this like the moaning and wailing and the hemming and hawing, Kamala Harris hasn't done a press conference. She needs us. She needs to come before us. Like, oh, she does?
Right.
Like, well, Donald Trump does it. Yeah, and he lies. And you accept the lies. Like, so you're willing to give him the pass because he comes to you, and you're willing to take the lies because you think he's checked some box. He's satisfied your desire to be important, when he's also the guy who really mastered the idea of bypassing the press altogether and going straight to his people and saying, here's who I am. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to own the libs. I'm going to make you crazy. I'm going to do all this stuff. And so I agree. I think that, I think that for me, I don't like just, gratuitous media bashing. I don't think that's helpful. But I do believe that a healthy, functioning fourth estate is critical for democracy. Mm-hmm. And when that fourth estate is not holding those who would not keep democracy safe to account, then I think they need a hell of a lot of exploration, explanation, and reflection about what it is they want to do. And it can't be about, I want to be on TV, I want to write a book, I need to have a source, I need this. No, it has to be like, why did you get into the business in the first place? And if it was just simply to make money, well, you can do that a lot of ways.
But Reed, the commentators that are brought on are given certain talking points within which to promote a certain strategy or ideology. I mean, I attack like Elie Honig, a guy who I used to call my friend. Elie Honig started shitting all over me day in and day out, day in and day out. Anytime that my name was mentioned, his eyes are rolling. He's acting like a complete asshole. Michael Cohen can't be trusted. He lied to Congress. But they never finished the sentence. What is it that I lied to Congress about? The number of times that I said that I spoke to Donald Trump about a failed Trump Tower Moscow project. The real answer was 10. I said 3 because that's the message that Trump and his people wanted me to make it as de minimis as possible. See, they don't want to talk about that because shitting on Michael Cohen became very beneficial to them. And the only way you're going to get called back as a commentator is you have to stay on their message, which is why I hold media accountable. When you start putting on people who are going to lie, and you don't do what Rachel Scott did, you don't call the guy out immediately and turn around and say, hey, this is unacceptable, this is a lie. But I am so disappointed that there's still this large swath of the American public that they see what's going on and yet they still tune in. You know, that's like, for example, why MeidasTouch Network, why even this podcast, why we have so many people that tune in. And the reason is because for 1 hour, you're going to get raw and unfiltered conversation between two guys, or me and a woman, right? Just two people who don't give a shit about appeasing our advertisers, about having, profitability in order to pay shareholders, right? That's not what this is about. And I do really believe that media plays such a huge role and will continue to play a massive, massive role in the determination of our next president. But here's the thing that, again, that I'm really disappointed with media and so many Americans. Do you not realize that there are no autocrats in the world that allow a free press? Do you really think that Putin allows a free press? Look at what happened to Navalny, right?
No, we know what happens to reporters in Russia.
Well, let's not just go Russia. Let's look at Mohammed bin Salman. Let's take a look at Jamal Khashoggi. I mean, at least Putin sent him to a gulag to die. In Turkey, they chopped poor Jamal Khashoggi into pieces. I mean, this is what autocrats do. And the fact that people don't see this, because it's so crystal clear, at least it is to me. But Reed, look, the hour goes by quick. I have one last question, and I don't want it to be ignored. How do you envision the Republican Party evolving after Trump? Because I believe that Trump is going to get wiped out in this upcoming election. I don't even think it's going to be close. It's my prediction. Will his ongoing influence lead to lasting divisions even within the party between moderate Republicans and MAGA? Or could it push the GOP toward a complete overhaul, reformation, renovation?
I would say this is that I think that one has to happen before the other. The former has to happen before the latter, which is, let's say Donald Trump loses. And I agree. I think he is on track for a historic loss, but we all got to get out there and do our part. But his influence will maintain pretty significantly for a while, which is, you'll be into, I know it sounds terrible, but we'll be into the 2025 election cycle. It'll be a midterm. There's going to be a bunch of people, a bunch of Republicans running for election or re-election. In an open seat, you're going to have the people who are going to try and out-MAGA each other. His endorsement, even though we've seen that it's typically poison, will be coveted, probably. And they will want that. And that will, by definition, probably control a lot of the kinds of candidates that you see get nominated. And a lot of those places, if they're nominated and there's even a hope in hell that a Democrat could get elected, right, then that very well might happen, because now these people are going to be so far away from the mainstream. And Trump is going to be somebody that the American people writ large have said we want to move past, but these people can't because they're relying on him. And then you have the Heritage Foundation and the Claremont Institute. These people are still true believers, right? They're still going to push a lot of this stuff. And so I think that you'll see, some combination of his influence will last maybe another cycle. I think you'll see a big number. I don't want to say big. I think a sizable number of voters who only came out of the woods because Trump appealed to them. And if he's gone, they may go back to and say, I knew the whole thing was rigged. I don't want anything to do with this. Probably, maybe not a bad idea. But until and unless the Republican Party suffers continual significant electoral defeat, you can't have that reformation that you were talking about. You can't have otherwise normal people say, okay, if we really believe in this as conservatives, right, or people who believe in a center-right philosophy of governance, and we want to win, then these people got to go. Now, of course, they're going to have to go out and decide what that looks like, because the idea of conservative governance that existed, let's say in 2012 with Mitt Romney, right, doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Right? So why do you want to be in office? If you just want to be in office because you want to blow things up and you hate government, well, like that's not what we're looking for. And the country's not there anymore. Old white guys are dying in droves. Young people of color, right, are coming online in bigger droves.
Yep.
Right? And so the country is fundamentally changing. And I will say this is that it will be on all of us in what I would still call the pro-democracy coalition. We can call it the pro-decency coalition, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that every opportunity we have to take one more MAGA politician or goon off the political board, we should.
Yeah, totally agree. Reed Galen, thank you, my brother. Great to see you. I'm going to have you back on as we get closer to the election. Again, the union, make sure people, you check it out.
Yes, please go to jointheunion.us. And as always, you can check my writing out over at Substack at the home front. And Michael, as always, thank you for having me.
Thank you, my brother. Good to see you.
You too.